This is White Plains Week, the weekly roundup of White Plains, Westchester, and world news. With John Bailey, editor and publisher of the daily internet newspaper White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, WPCNR.com. Jim Benerofe, editor and publisher of SuburbanStreet.com and WhitePlains.com. White Plains Week, what's happening? Who are the newsmakers? What's in store for the future? The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the participants. White Plains Week is presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76, Verizon Fios Channel 45, and on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. Now, White Plains Week.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. and Ms. White Plains, Westchester, and the world. John Bailey, the old Citizen reporter, here with the Dean of the White Plains School of Journalism, Jim Benerofe.
Thank you, John.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Right. What happened this week, Jim?
What happened this week? Well, here are the headlines for the week of August 30th, 2019. School opens Tuesday in White Plains, New York, USA, with a lot of questions for the state and every school district. Sales tax figures have dull July, and it puts White Plains and Westchester County in a hole. Presidential race raises questions no one is asking. I will have an editorial comment. A new book comes out on White Plains in the 20th century.
Thank you, Jim. And of course, right now we're dealing with White Plains in the 21st century. And let's go to the White Plains Week video newsreel March of Time for August 30th, 2019. And schools all over the state open. And here are some of the schools in Westchester County, USA. And we're going to be discussing the relevancies of some of the local school districts around the White Plains City School District. And of course, it's time to welcome back the Tiger Roar. Next slide. There we go. That is one of the very many media outlets the White Plains School District has that you can take advantage of and learn all about upcoming meetings, etc. And in fact, there's going to be a meeting coming up, I believe, on the 9th of September, in which they will probably address the assessments. They are going over them now, and so far there has been not too much comment. And on the state assessment comparisons, here are some questions that no one's asking. The state ELA results, Jim, as we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, still stick in my craw. Grades 3 to 8, 45% pass across the state. No difference from 2018. How can there not be a difference? In New York State, 51% of white students passed, 35% of blacks passed. That's the grades 3 to 8. And Latinos, 36% passed. And I mean, negligible improvement there. And, you know, this really intrigues me. Now, here are some questions that I would like to ask. Why no improvements in the second year, State Education Department? Are new tests still too hard? Or is education, which is actually teaching the children, disconnected totally from even paying attention to the assessments? Why? Are school districts ignoring what results of the assessments say? Why can't results be released by June the 1st, when the schools would have 3 months to really see where they're at? Doesn't this make a little sense to you?
Yeah, well, I think that the percentages really have to go way up.
They sure do.
They can't have only 36% or 35%
passing. Yeah.
passing, and it's not not acceptable. And if the school systems can't improve that, we need to have a minimum of 50% passage, and it should really be up between 60 and 75% passing.
Oh, absolutely. Can we go back to the question slide, please? Now, why isn't the state holding Quasar, the test preparers, and superintendents of schools across the state into hearings right now so that they can find out and discuss seriously what's wrong? What is the disconnect here? Why aren't you superintendents doing something about this? What can we do? Let's find some solutions. State Education Department is paralyzed by these results, I think. And right now, Governor Cuomo has got to find out what's wrong and what the disconnect is before he even considers installing a new Commissioner of Education. You'll note the previous Commissioner of Education bailed out when she saw the results. You know, I mean, for a new opportunity with someone connected with education business, okay? When you bail out that quick, unexpectedly, you know you've got a disaster on your hands. I mean, that's what that said to me. Now let's go around and see what the White Plains figures are. We've gone over this before, but it is important. It is so important. White Plains School District, 2019 ELA 3 to 8, 43% passed. District-wide, whites 70% passed. Blacks 32% passed, and we're even down 4% from last year. Latinos 31% passed, down 3 points. And in the math, take a look at the math, 44% passed. And then whites 70% again passed the math. Blacks 31% passed the math, slightly ahead, and 35% of Latinos passed slightly ahead. That's the White Plains numbers, and I think the school district is really looking at this very hard. And look, our daughter got a great education at White Plains High School, but if you were, I mean, I do not understand what the disconnect is. Why do we say that our students are performing and the state assessments say they are not? I mean, this is the question of the age for the state. This is probably the best state for education in the union, in the entire country. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
I think we're really smart, you know,
Right.
in New York State education-wise, but we're not smart enough.
Right.
Right, it's up to us for our own performance. Now, I just out of curiosity wanted to look at what some areas around the White Plains School District did. So let's go to the New Rochelle and Yonkers figures. Now, New Rochelle is somewhat akin to White Plains. 2019 ELA, 47% passed in New Rochelle, down a point from last year. Whites, 68% passed, up slightly. Now that's a great percentage for New Rochelle. 68% of whites passing the ELA. Black students, only 40% passed, and down slightly. Latinos, 36%. Over on math in New Rochelle, 70% passed in math. Splendid job there. Now, very much akin with, sorry, I made a mistake. 50% overall in the district passed the math. White students, though, 70% passed it. Blacks, 37% passed the math, down 3 points, or rather up 3 points, and the Latinos up a point at 42%, a good performance there. Over in Yonkers, we have the black hole of education. 32% of ELA students passed. 32%. Think about that. That's a third. Less than a third. And they get millions from the state. What are they doing with it? they really need to do something. That school district, I believe, should be taken over by the state because they're not doing the job. 35% passed the math. So, I mean, there's no significant. I mean, whites, 44% passed, up 4%. And 54% of white students in Yonkers passed the math. In black student circles, you've got really terrible scores here. 24% passed ELA, up from 5%, but I mean, and in math, 24% of the blacks passed in Yonkers. Latinos, 27% passed the ELA, and 29% passed the math. Now, spanning the county, here are just some sample districts around us. In Harrison, 60% passed. This is one of the best scores going over in Harrison, past the ELA, 60%. As you say, that approaches what you considered acceptable. And in math, 69% passed throughout Harrison on the grades 3 to 8. Good job by the Harrison School District, no matter what they're doing. Now, of course, we have to take into account it's a much smaller town, and of whites, 64% passed, and virtually the same as last year, 70% math. Blacks, 54% passed. An excellent job by Harrison on the black population. Latino, 49%. I mean, this is really, I think we got to talk with Harrison, see what they're doing over there with those minority populations. In Portchester, we do not have a good scene here. In ELA, 33% passed. Math, 31%. Blacks and Latinos hovering around 30%, up slightly, but still not great because that district is, I believe, heavily black and Latino. And that's Portchester Rye Central School District, not the city of Rye, okay? I just want to make a point about that. And in Greenberg, 41% of the ELA students passed, up 5%. In math, 39% passed, whites 64%, and in math 56%, and the blacks and Latinos hovering in the 30s in Greenberg. So I have to say that there has to be more cooperation, you know, from the various districts saying, what are you doing? What am I doing? The state has to take the head on this and, I hate to say it, but form a task force. What do you think? You've been watching education a long time.
Well, I think that they've really got to, as they say, take the bull by the horns and start to really work with these kids. And if it takes even after school classes or stuff like that, I think they should do it. I think that they've got to get everybody up to 50% or better.
Fast.
Right. And if you look at other countries, particularly Asian countries, and we know that we have a lot of Asian students here, their math scores are way up there. And if we want to compete in the world, then I think that we've got to do something to make us competitive.
Speaking of competing in the world, you had an editorial this week on whiteplains.com. Here's the picture of the webpage where the editorial is. And this is the first one from you in a long time. Would you share it with us?
Yeah. I thought a long time before I wrote this editorial, but it's entitled Too Old to Lead. The three leading candidates for President of the United States are all in their mid to late 70s. Probably 90% of people in that age group are retired or planning to retire in the very near future. They are not thinking of running a major corporation or even a small company, to say nothing of running the most powerful country in the entire world. These three men, President Donald Trump, former Vice President Joe Biden, and United States Senator Bernie Sanders, have all exhibited age-related behavior during their campaigning. The national media seems to be ignoring this issue. These men are old, and it is a serious issue. The odds of them dying or developing an incapacitating illness during their term in office is very high. Additionally, the normal aging process will also take its toll. It's time for a dose of reality. Old men or old women can't run a country of 329 million people. If you're over 65, running for president is just not a good option. And I put a footnote on the editorial so that people understand that I come from the age group and I know what I'm talking about. I'm 78 years old. I thought a very long time before writing this editorial. Many of my friends are in this age group. I am very familiar with the problems they face. The willingness to choose candidates in this age group is absolutely crazy. And it's also ridiculous.
And somewhat irresponsible.
Yes. And what disturbs me is that they are giving so much publicity to these old people in the campaign, the media is, and they are keeping the others out of the limelight.
Oh, good point, James.
And
really.
they are the young, vibrant, more practical candidates.
Young swashbucklers.
Whatever.
But, you know, they make a lot of sense, and the media just covers it as a story or a sports contest, but it's the most serious election we have ever had. And we have people who are not really, in reality, running, you know, really running with a head on their shoulders.
That they are not going to be able to do the things, and I know from my own personal background, that are necessary to run the country properly. And I've heard the argument from friends, well, if they pick good people and surround it. All the good people that Trump picked have gone by the wayside.
Yes, quickly.
We've lost Mattis. We lost Rex Tillerson. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just pathetic.
It is very pathetic. And
there is a lot of stuff, contrary to what the media may think. Trump is having probably a lot more age problems than is clear. I mean, he changes things on a whim. And I'm not saying that everything he's done is bad, but he can't function as a prime leader at his age. Just doesn't happen. And let me also point out, I consider myself to be in reasonably good physical condition. I do a lot of exercise. I swim 250 to 300 days a year, anywhere from a quarter of a mile, and occasionally I'll do a mile. But most of the time I do half a mile, and sometimes only a quarter of a mile.
Consistency is the key.
Right.
Well, there's one thing that everybody is asleep on, and that is the state of the Westchester County economy. And let's go to our cash watch. I'm the only one follow these figures. This is boring, so people who don't like lots of complex figures based on excellent baseball statistics, and turn your sets off now and come back in about 10 minutes. But anyway, if you're interested in what's really happening in the true picture of county and city finances, July was a wake-up call. The heat wave wilted the city sales tax dollars in July, and the county sales tax was only up after 7 months of their figures, 7 months of the fiscal year, which started in January, their sales tax was only up 2.5%. That's the inflation rate. Just natural inflation. Now, what does this mean? Next slide pitch. The city sales tax was down 279,762 from July 2018 in the first month of the city's fiscal year in July, and that's 3.9 million compared to 4.2 million approximately in July 2018. That means we're down 6.7% with 11 months to go. And as soon as you start falling off and stumbling in your sales tax handle and the sales in your city, this has a cumulative effect, and you have to make that up month by month.
You know, there's an analysis
Yeah.
that needs to be done.
Yes.
It needs to be done with the county. It needs to be done with all the cities
Yes.
and all the towns and everything. They have got to evaluate the amount of retail space that there is. They have to evaluate the merchandise that is being sold. In other words, how many women's clothing stores, how many men's clothing stores, etc., and really break that down.
See where they're at.
And they've got to do this on a county level too, and they'll find out exactly where the sales tax is coming from. They also have to compare that to computer statistics on how much stuff is being sold online.
Yeah, that's what's killing them. It's killing them, and we have to figure out whether we're actually getting that sales tax paid as they're supposed to for online sales. Now, what this creates for the county is what I call a cash cliff. Next slide, please. Without 1% sales tax figures in from August yet, the county needs 6% growth rate the next 5 months to erase the 2019 deficit that this 1% sales tax was supposed to help. The county is desperate for August through December consumer booming spending. The 1% sales tax adds little to the monthly handle, and robust volume is needed. And we're tracing that cash now. Next slide, please. Calling all cash. The county had $320.4 million in the till through July. That's a 2.5% increase over the first 7 months. That is sluggish, to say the least. If they match August-December performance from last year, with a 1% sales tax increase, they earned $244,000 plus $2,442,000 in increased sales tax from the 1%. This would give the county $567,000 in sales taxes over $550,000 last year. 3% increase. And what do they really need? Next slide. The county, I think, is over-optimistic in forecast of the sales tax effect. And when they get ready to dive into the pool of cash at the end of the year, it's going to be shallow. That's Scrooge McDuck, diving into an empty pool of cash. It needs a 6% growth rate in sales tax dollars to top $570 million. That will generate $252,600,000, including $14,300, $14,300,000 more in sales taxes from that 1% increase. Sales tax receipts of $575 million, or a 4.5% increase over last year's $550 million. That just about covers our deficit for this year. And the point here is people have to get out there and buy something today, tomorrow, lots of things each day if we're going to make a 6% growth rate.
Especially if you want to beat out the tariffs.
Yes, buy local in stores, please. Now, we are in the White Plains in the 21st century, but there's a new book out, and let's take a look at it. It's White Plains in the 20th century, a new book out on White Plains. And tell us about it, James.
Okay, I got a copy of this book from the publisher. And you may be familiar with these books. There's a lot of them. You'll see them in Barnes & Noble in the local area. The book was written by Ben Himmelfarb and Elaine Messina. And Ben was at the White Plains Library. And Elaine Messina is I think the archivist for the city of White Plains. And the book is interesting. It goes by decades. They have...
Hold up some of the pictures. Okay.
There's some pictures.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah, this was the Gedney Farms, by the way.
Uh-huh.
This is the
In the
hotel
lower
that
right.
was there years ago. Before I even lived in White Plains, or maybe before I was even born.
Now, it's somewhat similar to the Renata Hoffman books, but
Well,
with
they did
a driving
the
narrative, right?
Yeah, they did the 1910s, the 1920s, the 1930s, 1940s. And I think they go through the 1980s. I don't know if they did the 90s or not.
The Saga of the Galleria,
Yeah, they do.
Yes.
They go through the
the
1980s.
Saga of the Westchester, right?
Yeah. So it's really, it's very entertaining to read.
And seems to have a driving narrative, whereas the Renata Hoffman books, which are classics in their own right.
And I know there's a picture in here of Renata.
Yeah.
Some of the things. So.
Yes, but the Hoffman books are something every White Plainsian should have, and probably this one too, because this puts it all into perspective in a narrative, hard-driving format, reasonably so. So, well, listen, we're sorry for that financial segment, but we think it's important. The county should pay attention to it, and if you are sorry you missed it, you can always see it again and get past my stumbling through the figures. But that's the whole problem. The county and the city have not been paying attention. And in the baseball season, it's not what you think you will do, it's what you do, what you actually do. John Bailey, Jim Benerofe, good night for White Plains Week.
This has been White Plains Week, news and commentary about White Plains, Westchester, and the world. The views and opinions expressed on this program were solely those of the participants. White Plains Week, produced by White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, and presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76 and Verizon Fios Channel 45. You may view White Plains Week anytime on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. For White Plains Week, this is Peter Katz speaking.